Have you ever wanted to deploy an AI agent to a phone number so that you can text them and correspond with them? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. I leveraged Twilio in combination with Langchain and OpenAI to create an AI appointment setter that's custom built for my business. And in this video, I'm going to go through exactly how I designed this, what are the components, and how you can set it up yourself. After a couple slides where I go through some of the basics, at the end, I'll show you some code, and I even have a link in the description so you can check out the repository yourself. My name is Levente, and this channel, Journeyman AI, I try to discuss AI concepts for my consulting business and make it fun in the process. So if you're interested in that, definitely hit the subscribe button and follow along because there's going to be plenty more videos to come. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to leverage Twilio messaging components to serve customers dynamic conversational AI. So that means there's no pre-recorded message structure. It's all dynamically being generated by OpenAI. And of course, my favorite tool is Langchain. Everything's written in Python. So let's get to it. I'm going to also put these slides in the description if you want to refer to them as well. So as just a basic structure here, what we're trying to do is build an appointment setter. So the user would fill out a form, maybe something on a website or something they see through an ad. And then we have basically three APIs. One of them generates the initial SMS, so it generates the copy of the text. One of them sends the initial SMS, and one of them is just called SMS, and that one acts as a webhook, and it messages back the user. So if a user fills out a form, we'll generate the text copy, we'll send the text copy, and we'll wait for them to respond, and when they respond, then they receive back a message from us. And of course, we log that in our database, and we create this dynamic conversational structure by remembering everything that they tell us, remembering the conversation history. And basically the problem that we have is that a lot of businesses require immediate follow-up with their leads, whether that's a law firm, really any kind of business that has some kind of digital presence. And human resources are not always available. You know, you may not want to pay for an expensive call center to always be on call. And a lot of the SMS solutions available today, I think definitely Twilio does have some out-of-the-box solutions as well. They're just not dynamic enough for specific use cases. So the solution here is to build this AI-based SMS agent that's able to generate a quote. It's able to answer basic questions and book an appointment for the user and the business to set up for a later date. So as an example, I've deployed this on a phone number. I'm deploying this for my own business, Journeyman AI, where we develop AI solutions for businesses. So as an example, in this case, a user fills out a form for a recommendation system, and we're pitching them on that left screenshot. You can see we're pitching them for how this is going to personalize their suggestions. Basically, this is just a service that they indicated that they're interested in, and when they fill out that form, we'll send them this text message, and then they could say, let's generate a quote. And then here, this is again more of like a basic prompt that I'm using, but it'll tell them what our retainer fees are, long-term costs, expected usage costs, and expected project timeline. And then it proposes a couple days to follow up with. And then in this case, the user responds, let's do Friday at 10. And then in the next slide, you see that it's booked, I booked Friday at 10 Eastern to discuss the recommendation system. So this is really just an MVP. I think definitely the size of the text here is a little bit too long to be optimal, but you get the idea that basically user fills out a form, they get that initial text, they can ask questions, generate a quote, maybe even try to negotiate the quote, right? So I have certain aspects in the prompt that are ensuring there's safeguards with respect to negotiation and stuff like that. So this is for my business, Journeyman AI, and we're using it for appointment setting. But really, I think the sky's the limit. Anything that you can imagine that you could leverage text-based SMS agents for, I think you could get started with building it. So for setup, we are using Twilio, which is, I guess, like the gold standard for messaging and customer service solutions, at least through the phone. So as just a step-by-step guide, it can take a little long to get approved here, but you really need to make a Twilio account. You set up a standard brand where you're putting in your company information. I think if you're a sole proprietor, meaning you don't have an LLC, you can set that up as well. Then you set up a campaign. Basically, Twilio makes it a little bit strict with regards to sending messages because users are required to opt in to be able to receive a message. So you have to tell them exactly where the users are opting in, and you have to go through some compliance checks to get approved, which basically just means you have to give them sample messages. That took about 2 or 3 days for me to get approved, but once you get approved, you can make a new messaging service, and then you can purchase a new 10-digit phone number through Twilio, and you can add that to your messaging service. And that's pretty cheap. I think it did cost maybe a flat fee to set up the campaign and everything, but the phone numbers are about, I think it's $1 a month per phone number. And then of course you are charged for the usage. The more messages and the longer those messages are, the more you're gonna be billed. So if you have questions about Twilio Setup, that was probably what took the longest, at least initially. Just let me know in the comments, I can help you out. So for the API structure, again, I said there's basically 3 services, and you could probably lump 1 and 2 together if you wanted. But basically, we have that generate initial text that is just leaving some placeholders empty for the name that you could fill in later. So it's basically sort of generating like a template that you can fill in with hard-coded user information. And that's pretty simple. That's really just a call. I use Langchain, but you could just call OpenAI to generate that. Then send initial SMS is basically takes the specific message you want to send to the phone number, and then it uses Twilio messaging API to send that message. So that's outbound from our server to the user. And then you set up another API just called SMS. And then this one is triggered whenever the user responds. So basically it requires us to sort of expose the API publicly because Twilio has to invoke something. So you can either deploy that on a server and get like a actual URL for it, or I'll show you later how to do it just locally, is use something called ngrok for port forwarding. It's not too complicated. It took me a little while to figure out, but I have a couple snippets in the repo that makes it a lot easier. So, and on the top right, I have the prompts, but again, you can just check out createagent.py in the repo. That has the full prompts that I'm using for my system with the placeholders, but you can obviously change this for your business or your use cases. So basically, in this case, the agent has access to 2 prompts, one of them for the initial text, so what are we sending out to the user, and the other one is, given the conversation history and maybe some user data, how should we respond? So just to kind of partition those out, I think it's easier because we do have the initial SMS generation and then the response. So moving forward, just a little bit about data schema, and then we'll get into the code very soon. Basically, we do have an agent class that stores the initial and ongoing prompt that I mentioned before, as well as the agent phone number, and it uses that for the conversation that it has with the user. And then every message, outbound or inbound, is logged in the message table, and any errors or response codes, that's logged in the SMS logs table. So pretty simple data schema. I'm using MySQL, but you can use any kind of relational database to store your messages. I definitely think it is nice, you know, if you had this running on a server and you needed to tweak some fix in the prompt, you can just go into the database and tweak the prompt there versus having to redeploy your whole service again. So that's kind of a nice flexibility there. Again, don't want to spend too much time on this. It's in the models.py file in the repo if you're interested in looking more in depth. So I think we can break and go to the code, but Basically, if you're interested in any AI consulting services, you can reach out to me at Journeyman AI. I've put my email here. And if you're interested in learning more about AI, definitely follow this channel. I'm happy to chat with you if you need any advice regarding the job market or you're looking for some kind of collaboration or internship. I'm always happy to talk to people, so reach out to me, and here's the GitHub repo link if you haven't found it already. So let's go through this code. Basically, you can follow along on your own, but I just wanted to show you probably the API endpoints makes the most sense. So here we have that generate initial SMS, and that's just set up with this generate SMS request, which kind of is basically just indicating that we need to generate for some user, maybe multiple users. They inquired about a specific product description, and we're going to use a specific agent to generate that request. Just go back down. Basically, what we do is we first get the agent, and then we take the agent's initial prompt and we pass that into generate initial text. And then we return the initial text and we write logs into the database. So if we look at this generate initial text function, again, I'm using Langchain, but this is very simple. I don't necessarily think you need Langchain here, but the more prompts and components and tools you have, I do find that it tends to be better. It's just easier to tweak as well. So we could take a look at the database, but really this is just taking, given a prompt, given a product description, a sample initial text message, which I'll show you in a second, and a prompt, we generate the output. So here we basically have a JSON output parser. You could use a string output parser. We're using the GPT4 model. And then we create this prompt template, which has the initial prompt, has the sample and product description going into it as input variables. And then it creates this chain and invokes the chain with the product description and sample. So I can show you in a sec what that looks like. If we just look at fixtures, that'll show you a sample of that initial text. So here we're just saying, hey, first name, that's what's left open to fill in. It's Levente from Journeyman AI. Thank you for interest in customer segmentation. Could you share your current challenges? We could generate a quote for you, blah, blah, blah. So I think the nice thing here is that you can constrain how exactly the SMS should look like. For example, Twilio requires you to put in some kind of message like this to indicate that you should be able to opt out. So we know that we need that in our SMS. So we're really it's almost basically like a certain example that we're giving the prompt so that it knows what the output should look like. So that's pretty simple. If we go back here, and by product description, in this case, definitely I could show you in the end, but basically product description is just, let's assume the user filled out a form about, marketing services, or in our case, the example I showed was recommendation systems. So it's just indicating that they have an interest in a certain thing. So we're going to gear the text message towards that product description, right? So again, this generate initial text, that's pretty simple. If we move down to the other API, that's send initial SMS. So now, we've taken, let's say we've generated our initial text, we filled in the user, who put in their name in that form on that specific product. We've generated that initial SMS, filled in the user's name, and now we're ready to send that off. So here, SMS request, we can go and look what that looks like, that class object here. So basically, it's a phone number that we're going to send it to, the initial text, the product description, and the agent ID. So that's the specific agent that we're using in this case. So let's move back down. And yeah, send initial SMS. So this is more involved a little bit, but basically what we're doing is given the agent ID, so that's somewhere hard-coded or passing it in to use this specific agent so we can version through different agents, or we might have multiple agents that are running it at the same time. We basically get the agent, and then we're going to use the agent. We're just going to log the agent ID in the conversation so we know which agent this user is speaking to. So that's why we need the agent. And then in this code, that's where we actually send the message to Twilio. So we're using a Twilio client, which you could check in the imports here exactly what we're importing. And then basically for the user, if this is initial text, likely we don't have the user in our system yet. So we run this function, which is really just a database function that either fetches that user or it creates a new user. And then we basically create a new conversation, likely because this is initial text. We're going to create a new conversation between the agent ID and the user ID. And then we add a message to that conversation. So these are really just database related functions. Then of course we write to the logs, assuming everything worked out. We have some exception handling here. So again, that's pretty simple. Now let's assume we've sent out the message. Now, if we move to the last API, which is SMS, basically here, this is now something that we're not calling, but when the user texts back as a response, then they're texting back that Twilio number, and we set up a system where Twilio forwards those requests to us to handle. So we're getting basically a Twilio request in XML, and then what we do is we check through who is this number coming from, and basically if we know if we found that user, right? So we fetch the user that the phone number is coming from, we fetch the conversation that we initially created when we initially created the text, and then we add a message to that conversation. So let's find it here. Generate text response. So this is where we're actually generating response given the conversation history and the product description and the agent's prompt. So a lot of this is some error handling here, but this is again using Langchain, very simple prompt template, and we use a JSON parser, but in this case I think you can use just a string output parser. So here we're passing in the conversation and the product description to create a response. So I think actually a good place to look at is this file where I create the agent. So in this case, this is assuming you don't have any agents in the database. This is what the initial agent looks like. So the initial prompt for that agent is here. And remember, we have the sample as one of the empty fields. And format instructions is just something you need from Langchain. And then product description, right? We have the product description. And then for basically the ongoing prompt, we have a little bit more information. We have just some generic, price stuff that I've put in here, which is obviously, very static, but we could have that connect to, an FAQ or a vector database or something to retrieve something else, right? So this is where I think there's a lot of room for improvement. But the idea is it has some basic info about, what to generate for a quote, when to book the appointment. Again, even here, that's hard-coded. It's not connected to any calendar yet, which I'm working on. But the idea is that it also has access to the conversation and, in addition, the product description. So based off the conversation, right here, it says the message should respond to the user's text message and move the conversation forward. So that's exactly it. Basically, these are the current prompts, initial prompt and ongoing prompt that I'm using. All right, so I think there's some other components here like models. Models has all of the database components. Instructions.sh, if you want to set this up for yourself, that's where I would start. That shows you how to install all the requirements, exactly what the environment variables you need are, and so forth. And let's see. Again, if you really do want to take this all the way, you can also run this reset DB to create, if you've set up your own MySQL server, you can run this and it'll create all the tables for you and stuff like that. But really everything should be in this instructions.sh if you want to follow that. I do have some Docker stuff if you want to take it the next step further and deploy it to an EC2 or some server where it's actually running on an ongoing basis and you don't want to host it locally. then you can do that. But now we're going to move to the local hosting, which basically what that means is that we can set this up to work, but it's as soon as I turn off my computer, that phone number is still going to be live, but it's not going to be able to respond to text messages. So let's go through and show you exactly how to do that. So I've basically set up 3 shells, and the first thing we need to do is run ngrok HTTP forwarding. So what this does is it allows you to host things locally, and it forwards any request to this URL. So we're going to use this URL. I'll just put it here for the time being, and we're going to put that into Twilio. So why don't we do that now? Let's go to Twilio and set that up. So basically here, what we're going to do is we're going to copy that ngrok URL into here, and we're just going to say that's here SMS. So what this does is whenever this, basically whenever a message comes in, it uses a webhook to invoke this URL, which is running live on my laptop. Okay, so we've saved that, and now we can go back to the code. So now we've set that up, right? And we're going to go open a new shell, and I'm just going to export my environment variables. I'm going to run this new environment that I've created. And now we're going to go back to main, and then there's this command that you need to run here called UVcorn. So this is using Fast API. I do like Fast API, I also like Flask. Okay, so now you can see it's saying running on localhost basically, but that's being forwarded to that ngrok that we have. And now we have a third shell, and again, I'm gonna I don't know if we really need it here, but we have this third shell where we're going to actually test the API and see if it's working. So I have this Python file called test SMS, and what this does is it has a random recommendation system here. That's the product description. You can make this whatever you want, but what it's going to do is we're going to invoke that generate initial SMS, then we're going to send the SMS, and then we're going to see if it comes up on our phone, and then we can go from there. So let's do that. So I'm just going to start here. I like using IPython, and we're going to just dump this in, and let's see if we can generate the initial text. Okay, so initial text, basically, it's leaving that first name blank. It's Levente from Journeyman AI. Now, okay, it's using this little rocket emoji. Talk about a recommendation system that we're pitching. It's got basically all the components that we want in that initial text. And then we're going to fill this in with first name. So go by Levi sometimes. And then here, what it's going to do is we're going to put in my phone number, my first name, and then let's see if we can run this here. So here, when we're calling this, you see it says 2. Basically, I have agent ID equals 2, product description, the initial text, and the phone number. So let's try to run that. Hopefully that works. Okay, so SMS copy generated, message ID. So that's the Twilio message ID. And hopefully I received a text. Okay, so I received the text, basically the one we're looking at, and I'm going to respond to it. So, I think it's basically what I have in the PowerPoint that I showed you guys, but I'm just going to respond back. Thanks for messaging. And while we're doing that, let's go back here, and you can see here okay, great. So we had a 200 response from generate initial SMS, and we had a 200 response from send initial SMS, and we had a 200 response from the SMS. And now I just received a new text back. So that's basically it. I'm gonna cut it there, and definitely feel free to clone that repo and send me any questions you have. This is just the bare bones, and now once you have this machinery, then you can start brainstorming on how you can integrate better LangChain, LangGraph or LangChain tools and other things into this SMS agent, and you can actually build clients some really cool stuff. So that's what I'm excited about, and I hope you are as well.